And one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life was to call Tariq's mother. I live here, and she lived in Seattle, Washington at that time. So it's quite far. And I had to do this on the telephone. How do you tell a mother that she's never, ever going to see her son again? Or hear him laugh? Or give him a hug? How do you do that? Tariq had a very special relationship with his mom. I do. Many of you can relate to that. And it took me a while. Eventually, I got it out. And she let out this loud, piercing shriek as she dropped to the floor. And I could hear her drop to the floor. Unfortunately, she wasn't by herself, and I finished a broken conversation with one of her brothers. And as I tell this story, I can hear her inner shriek. I can hear her shriek in my inner ear. It will probably haunt me for the rest of my life. And what I really want to talk about today, since we are celebrating or kicking off the season for nonviolence and peacemaking, what does it really look like? What are those principles that each one of us can adopt to create more peace in this world, to create more peace within us, in our families, in our communities? And what are those tenets of nonviolence? Now, when my son was alive, I was not doing this work. I worked as an international investment banker. I was born in Kenya. My roots are Eastern. I was educated in England. And my educational background is in math and finance, and I speak a half a dozen languages. I traveled the world, had a good income, a great social life. It was routine for me to fly in from London, change suitcases, and fly to Tokyo. And then I had no life. I have a very full life today. 80% of my life is about kids today, both areas. At the foundation, we keep them away from gang, guns, and violence. In the Kanai program, we are actually turning gang members around into functioning members. So I am an investment banker who is now a social worker. But I look at that as a step up in my career. Because before, it was all about money. Today, it is about saving lives of children. What's more important? It doesn't have to be your child that dies. When a child dies in any community, I believe we are all diminished. At 20, Tariq had a lot of living to do yet. I did not really know this. And I served on boards of nonprofits, and I practiced as a Sufi Muslim, and I tithed to my mosque. But I sat on boards of arts and theaters and stuff like that. I had no clue about youth violence. And since Tariq was murdered by a gang member, I asked some very fundamental and elementary questions, like, why do our kids join gangs? And the answers I got horrified me. I was told they join gangs to get respect, because gang members are respected. Their peers sometimes act like them or dress like them. Or I was told they join gangs because they live in areas where if they don't join gang A, they are targeted by gang B. A lot of racial gangs. We have Hispanic gangs, African American gangs, Asian gangs, white gangs. So they join for protection. Or I was told they join gangs to get a sense of belonging because sometimes they do not have it in their own homes. Over the last 15 years, I've been doing this work, 15 years and 3 months. The foundation was started 9 months after Tariq died. I have met a lot of gangbangers. So I do this work in prisons as well. So I'm also very, very active in the foundation in schools. And I've met gang members that come from 4 to 5 generations of gangs. Essentially, they had no choice. They were born into this tradition. I asked, how deep is this problem? It's huge. The second biggest reason we lose young souls. First is auto accidents. 75 kids get shot, 16 die, the others end up in wheelchair. And if that was not a travesty, another 200 plus kids are arrested for violent crime where there is a gun involved every single day. I'm talking kids, ages 13 through 19, and I'm talking every single day. Reverend Madison mentioned we are by far the most violent nation in the world. I asked, how do we stack up with the rest of the world? Shamefully. The Economist, which is a very reputable magazine, some of you might have read it, did a study. They took 75 countries in the world, and they added all the kids that die in those 75. These are first world countries. I'm not talking about the Indian subcontinent or the African subcontinent. I'm talking about England, France, Germany, Japan, first world countries. And they took 25 of those first world countries like ours, and they added all the kids that die in those 25 countries. They took the total and multiplied that by 11. That is how many we lose in the United States of America. This is a US malaise. And as the only superpower, the richest nation in the world by far, which is an awesome responsibility, this is not good, because what happens in the United States eventually happens in the planet. We have a tremendous impact on the global culture. If you traveled overseas, what do you see, right? McDonald's, KFC, Starbucks, SUVs, Levi's, American music, American movies. Unfortunately, we are also exporting our violence. And quite frankly, I did not see the wisdom of spending hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, and we get desensitized to it. 1 billion seconds ago was 1947. 1 billion minutes ago, Lord Jesus Christ was walking on the planet. Just to put it in perspective. And we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on wars on foreign soil, when every single day, right here in our own backyard, our defenseless children are being wiped out in a frenzy of bizarre violence. Does that make any sense to you? No. It's not about money. We have plenty of money. We can do anything we want, and often we do. This is not something that we cannot solve. The Khamisa Foundation has a solution. And I started with a very simple premise, that violence is a learned behavior. No kid was born violent. If you accept that as a truism, nonviolence can also be a learned behavior. But you have to teach it. Kids are not going to learn this through osmosis, and they're certainly not going to learn it in our culture. So the Khamisa Foundation was founded with the mission of stopping kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence, and we essentially have 3 mandates. Our first mandate is to save lives of children. Our second mandate is to inspire and empower the right choices so they don't get into gangs or end up with a life of violence for all the wrong reasons. And our third mandate is to teach the principles of empathy, of compassion, of forgiveness, of peacemaking. And we were